This episode of Legends, the series, is brought to you by these fine companies.
Is it disappointing that people look at your shortcomings as a human being and look past your accomplishments as a drag racer?
Well, no. I don't get that feeling anymore. When I go to the drag races now, I have a great time. I went, I think, 8 or 9 times last year. Going to go a couple times next year. Everybody says hi to me. Don Perdone told me, he said, "Hey, it looks like both of us come out the other side of this pretty good, huh?" I said, "Yeah." And for him to say that to me meant a lot because he was my idol. At a young age, I was 8 years old. My dad and mom took me to the first drag races, and they ended up buying a little injected junior fuel car. And my brothers took turns driving that car. So I was always the mechanic on that car with my dad. I could not ever understand why my brothers would never work on the car, and it was me and my dad that worked on the cars and always got them ready. So I really wanted to be more of a crew chief rather than a driver in the beginning. My dad was going to quit. I went to work for a guy named Steve Carboni when I was 16 years old. After I got out of high school, I went to the races, and it was him and me and his wife, and I was his chief mechanic at 16. So that's how much I knew about being the mechanics of a race car. Then my dad decided to quit, and Garlits came out with the rear engine dragster. And I said, well, I'd try driving one of those, because I never wanted to drive a car with the motor in front, because of getting hurt. The first race car I ever drove was a Top Fuel dragster. It was a front engine car. My dad said, "I'm not going to build a rear engine car unless you can prove to me that you can drive this thing." And Tom McEwen and Don Perdone signed my driver's license at Lyons Drag Strip. And all I can remember is the last run I had to make at night, and the header flames were so big that it scared the you-know-what out of me. But after I got that, then we had, I think, the 3rd or 4th rear engine car after Garlits.
Yeah, my name's Jeb Allen, and I'm from Santa Rosa, California.
1972, Jeb Allen was 18 years old when he first won at the Summer Nationals.
You know, I think they took me serious at the Summer Nationals, or when I won my first race. Our first race I went to, it was Ontario Motor Speedway, a big event. It was a 64 car show. We made it down to the last 8 cars. And won Best Appearing Crew. And I think we got recognition at that point. I'm still the youngest person to ever win an NHRA National World Championship. And I've won an NHRA World Championship, an IHRA World Championship, and an AHRA World Championship. And I think I'm one of only 2 or 3 people that's done that.
Jeb Allen, one of the youngest professional drag racers, former Summer Nationals champ, and certainly one of the really strong runners here at this World Championship race. When I started drag racing in 1972,
when I won the Summer Nationals, we got approached at Indianapolis by Revell Toy Company, Dodge, and Pennzoil, and they formed an alliance and bought me everything brand new. It was probably one of the biggest sponsorships at that time, besides maybe the Army card that Don Perdone had. And I came back the next year with all brand new motors, trucks, and trailers. Dodge, everything was brand new. And Revell made a model of my car, and it was the first model they had made of a dragster.
Do you think maybe that big of a deal so early in your career, did that help or hurt you?
Well, that definitely helped me. I couldn't have continued to do it because my dad was going to quit, and the money part of it was we weren't that well off like some of the people that do it. 70% of the people we raced against were hobbyists. This was their flying in their Learjets or their jets, and we'd race against them and outperform them. But the part that got to me the most was being able to be the guy out there with the Levi's on, not having all of this money besides every dime I earned at the racetrack to keep my car running.
Jeb Allen saving the parts for another day because there'll be another race. And Jeb Allen, the winner. Look at him applauding as the car sort of guides itself down the racetrack, and an elated Jeb Allen just applauding himself.
I was down to earth. I was flat. You know, I learned one thing: turn on the wind light. Every time, no matter what it takes, turn on the wind light. What's it going to take to do that? I conducted myself the same way I conduct myself now. I was just, I think, looked at as a spoiled little kid that had gotten all this stuff. And when nobody really knew, you know, I lived drag racing from the time I was 8 years old till I was 29 or something when I finally retired. John Wiebe, that weekend before that, we had split a hotel room together. He was probably my best friend. It you know, obviously damaged or ruined our relationship together. Well, I remember leaving the start line, obviously, and then all of a sudden, boom, he runs into me, and then there's this fire, and my car spun around backwards. I knew it broke in half. I took my hands and put over my face, and luckily I had all third-degree burns down through here. I have skin grafts. I spent a month and a half in the hospital with skin grafts on my hands, but I saved my face by I said, I don't want to watch no more of this. I had enough. And then we ended up at the end of the racetrack, got out of it was a hot day in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and took all my fire suit off and set me on the ground and gave me second-degree burns all over my rear because I was sitting on the ground. But that was a tough time. People like Pennzoil and Revell and Dodge all come together and helped me get back into it again. And then I went out and rented the racetrack at Irwindale Raceway. And the second run I made, I hung a valve open, the blower blew off and smacked the row bar and put a big dent in the row bar. And I still said, I'm going to do this. You know, I left that dent in the row bar to remind me, but it was pretty tough to get back into it again after that.
What do you think when you look back at it?
I think I'm lucky I'm alive. Because the only reason I wanted to drive a rear engine dragster is because the motor was behind you. Well, they put the fuel tank behind me. And everybody had the fuel tank behind the rear seat. Nobody had them on the front of the car. And all of a sudden, this guy runs into me and I go down the racetrack backwards. So I figure I didn't do anything wrong. If I had done something wrong and caused that much calamity, I probably would have quit because I would have felt incompetent.
Did you and Weeby ever make up after that?
Yeah, we became friends. I mean, acquaintances, and we're probably would be just friends today. It's just, it was something that happened. It was an era of really violent tire shake. A couple people died from this. Not too long after that, Dick LaHaye had a brand new car and said, "Look, I'm only going to make a half a run at Gainesville," where I'm entering the lights and all of a sudden I see his front wheel. And I thought, he's not supposed to be there. And his throttle had stuck open and he came over and across the racetrack and went into the field and flipped and rolled. And I ran through the swamp and I was the first one to see him, and he's got bones sticking out of his arms, and I threw up in my helmet and I just... But it was, so there's a lot of experiences. I watched a lot of people at Lions Drag Strip with the clutches flying out of the cars and the blowers without the safety equipment. Friends of my dad's, dying, and so it was a pretty tough sport.
Jeb Allen, brought up in Idaho in the Barley. Both these men work on their cars. Allen, however, says he's got some secrets in his engine that, when perfected, will give him 500 more horsepower than anyone else. If that's the case, Allen will have more than 3,000 horsepower under his right foot. They're on the line, waiting for the lights. Watch the lights. Straight line start, Graham at the moment at the start, but Allen, with more horsepower, pulls ahead, and clouds of smoke envelop both cars as they cross the finish line. And Jeb Allen, the red-bearded one from Idaho, comes home a winner in 5.923 seconds. A top-end speed, 229 miles an hour. Graham, 6.013. He was faster. Oh, and when you're hot, you're hot.
So I sort of had the crowd that was for the little guy. I was the last one to win a world championship with just, holes in my Levi's and enough money to get from one racetrack to the next. Larry Miner came over one day and asked me if I could ever go to work for somebody. And I said, "Oh no, I could never do that." And I think he was trying to offer me a driver's job. Sort of big mistake there, maybe.
But we lost the last 2 NHRA races by smoking the tires. And I think, we're a tough customer, and everybody knows that, so we're just trying to play the game a little bit until we can get the horsepower, the curve power.
We wouldn't go to all the national events. The last 4 or 5 years, I think I attended all the NHRA, AHRA, and IHRA national events to try to become the world championship. I said I wanted to become the best I could. And no matter what it took, whatever I had left over at the end of the day, I'd piece together. The English leather guy would show up, the president, and he'd see what I had parts-wise, and next thing I know, I'm getting a brand new motor from Keith Black Racing Engines from him, So there was, my parents used to give me a supercharger on my birthday. A lot of people think maybe they supported my drag racing, but my dad and mom didn't do nothing after night, if I got going on my own.
Did you feel like you needed to have that NHRA championship to legitimize the other ones?
Yes, I did, and I wasn't going to quit until I got it. I'd raced I was racing against in IHRA. It was Gary Beck, Shirley Muldowney, Richard Tharp. It was no piece of cake, and we ended up like 3rd and 2nd each year in those categories, in those organizations. And when we won the IHRA World Championship, we were 3rd in NHRA. And when we won NHRA, we were 3rd in IHRA. So there was a lot of races, a lot of hard running, and it was an easy competition. It was tough.
And they're off, and Jeb Allen loses the whole shot to Salisbury, but Salisbury's engine going away as they come across the line. Still, it seemed that something went wrong on Allen's machine also. So Dwight Salisbury wins it, but a problem perhaps with both cars.
A big problem for Jeb Allen, Paul. Had he beaten Salisbury, he would have clinched the World Championship.
A very disgruntled Jeb Allen. You can imagine how he feels. He may have just given away the world title with a small mechanical error on his machine. He has to be terribly disappointed.
Paul, Jeb Allen is one of the most emotionally charged drivers in this sport. It's going to be very hard for him to become a spectator here this afternoon, watching Johnny Abbott or maybe even Gary Beck try to take his title away from him.
There is Jeb Allen. He is the man that Beck has to beat for a world championship. And once again, Beck has to make a pass through the traps at 247 miles an hour. His ET must be 5.64 in order for him to take the world title away from Jeb Allen. Despite that, Beck can still win the event title here today.
Paul, I'm with Jeb and Cindy Allen down here at the end of the racetrack. Some $25,000 just seconds away for this young couple, professional drag racers.
And for Gary Beck, this is the moment of truth. They are both staged and on the line. Gary Beck with a hole shot as he pulls away. It's Gary Beck. What a tremendous run this is. Gary Beck has the event title as Salisbury's car lights up. A tremendous fire. The parachute burns away. Salisbury, he's protected now. He's in front of that fire, but it still burns at the back of Salisbury's car as he slides the machine to a stop. And Jeb Allen has won the championship. Gary Beck with the fastest car.
I got tired of match racing. I'm going to become the best or I'm going to go broke doing it. Well, I won 3 world championships and I went broke.
At what point in your career did you realize, I can't do this anymore? I can't continue to swing at windmills. I just can't do this anymore. What point did that point get driven home for you?
That point got driven home a lot. It's when a lot of the people I'd race against were doing things that supported their race cars that might not have been the most nicest way to do it. There was also big sponsorships, little sponsorships. Half of them were flying in their jet airplanes. They had diesel trucks and trailers. And I was quite intimidated by all of that. And it just made me tougher. And it just kept making me tougher. And I said, I'm going to get them, you know. And
at the start of eliminations this morning, Allen's car was being powered by the 4th motor to rest within the chassis in 3 days.
1982, you're the defending champion. That was a season that was anything but worthy of a championship's defense season. It's just like you couldn't catch a break any way you went. Tell me how hard that was.
That was really tough. We went to Australia and raced over there, came home, took the car was sitting there. I showed up a day after qualifying and it started. The car went out, did a big wheel stand. I got out of it. I got back in it again and I set the mile-an-hour record at that racetrack because the fuel pump locked up and everything just happened to work right. So we were off to a pretty good start, feeling sort of good. And then it just started fading and it costing more money, and the other racers had more assets than we did. And I just started to lose my drive and determination.
The motor in Allen's car did not belong to him. It had been loaned to him by Mark Danicus, owner of the Top Fuel entry, driven by Lucille Lee. That car has carried Lucille to 1 national event victory so far this season, and she's currently second in the World Championship point standings, right behind Shirley Muldowney. The race was over at the instant of its start. In spite of the fact Bernard got to the finish line first, he left behind him a red light, instant disqualification. But it was then After ensuring himself a berth in the second round, the Jeb Allen made a startling announcement. He was withdrawing from further competition because of engine problems. This is Lucille Lee, the driver of the car scheduled to run against Jeb Allen.
Mark, I'll be straight up with you. There's a lot of conversation that Jeb Allen, in that he was using your engine, was being used to block for Lucille Lee, and that the car is not really broken, and he has pulled out to give Lucille a single and more points.
Well, Steve, the best way I know to put this, and it makes us look bad now, but 3 days ago when Jeb's sitting over there on his tailgate, he has no motors, he's broken, he's out of money. Nobody else in the place had helped the boy.
So could it be that Jeb Allen, his car equipped with a motor borrowed from Mark Danicus, has withdrawn from the second round to give Lucille a free ride into the semifinals? What's going on in the Lucille Lee pit area? It's Jeb Allen's car, and obviously the engine is out of the car, and there it is on the hook. That is Mark Danicus, the owner of Lucille Lee's car, and that is the engine that Jeb Allen said was no good. And that's Lucille Lee's car, and it looks like they're getting ready to drop Jeb Allen's engine in the car. Jeb Allen is hard at work in the pit area. He's preparing the engine that he declined to run in the second round of competition, obviously getting ready to drop it into Lucille Lee's car. Remember, this engine is the one that is owned by Mark Danicus. He had previously loaned it to Jeb Allen for his use. Jeb declined to run it after thinking he had hurt the motor in round number 1. Not only is the engine gone out of Jeb Allen's car, but the wheels and tires too.
I wouldn't have done anything different. No one else in that pit area came up to me and offered me a motor. I hadn't raced Mark Danicus, Lucille Lee, for like a year and a half. And Mark said, I'll lend you the motor, but you can't race me with my own motor. And I said, okay, you got a deal. And so I couldn't race him. I just couldn't do it. I'm a man of my word, you know. It was nothing to do with, it was a friendship with this man that I had. A coincidence that I ended up having to race him.
Did you guys, had you seen the ladder, know that that was possibly what was going to happen anyway? That you were going to have to race Lucille Lee if you won?
Yes. And I did everything to lose. I waited until the other guy took off. He red lighted. So I was trying to get out of it gracefully. Then I rushed up to him. I passed him at the finish line because my car was running real well, and I shut it off early. And that's where I think all the controversy started. It was a very emotional situation for everybody involved. But like I said, I told that man I wouldn't race him with his own motor, and nobody else in the pit area was coming around to offer me a motor. And I had a brand new motor, and the camshaft seized up in it. And so I was like done. I had very few parts. It's not a secret that I'm a recovering alcoholic, and I couldn't get these sponsorships because I think the people would stand back. You're the last one to know when you're a drug addict or an alcoholic. You're the last one to know that everybody else knows, you know. And so I think for me to be able to have gotten these other sponsorships, it was an impossibility, and I finally recognized that. And so I just sort of wrapped up the end of the '82 season and drifted off into space for several years. Don Garlits, he lost respect for me towards the end, as many people did, because I was drinking quite a bit, and you know, at the end of the racetrack, I'd have 2 beers on the way back down the return road, whether I lost or not, you know. My addictions got probably as bad as anybody's could ever imagine. Living in the back of a truck, you know, my parents, I came home one day, and for 5 years I had these drinking. I got into drinking quite a bit and drugs quite a bit more. And I came home one day to see my dad, and I asked my mom where my dad was, and she said, he's in the closet hiding. He don't want to see you. And it took me a week and a half later, and I checked myself into a recovery facility. So the tough love is what saved our relationship with my family. And then I took care of my dad after that, and it was really funny because every day he called me and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm working." He says, "Well, when are you coming over?" And so I'd go over every morning the last couple of years he lived with me. I said, "Dad, why do you keep calling me?" He says, "I'm paying you back."
How tough was that to hear that your dad didn't want to talk to you, and he was, I guess for lack of a better word, ashamed?
That was the tough love. That's where the big book, or the Alcoholics Anonymous, talks about tough love. And it took the tough love of them not letting me come over and get free food or borrow $20 or do this or do that. They just wanted me out of their life. And that's what did it. That's what made me decide, hey, I need to turn around.
When you left the house after that moment, I'm assuming you left the house, what were your emotions?
I just took all the drugs I had and started taking them until they ran out. When they ran out, I went and checked into the rehab facility, it tore me up. It just completely tore me up because my dad meant so much, my family meant so much to me.
When you took your first step into sobriety, what was that like, and how overwhelming did the road look ahead of you?
Well, I went to a 7-day facility, a state run, and they had a 30-day program. And the guy seen my sincerity. And everybody in the town of Santa Rosa where I was living sort of knew who I was from the drag racing. And he let me stay for 30 days, and I got down on my knees and cried and thanked God that I was able to stay. And then I went to 3 meetings a day for a year straight, and I did it just like I did drag racing. I said, I'm going to turn on the wind light, and the wind light for me is to stay sober. I had a construction background because for 5 years after I quit racing, I went to work for a contractor. And I cleaned out ditches and carried lumber and did all of these different things. And by the time I got done with that, I could build a house. I learned quickly how to do every facet of the construction industry, or the construction business. Then I went to work for a construction management company and learned the management part about that for a year. And then my wife and me, Sue, moved to Redding, California, and seen an opportunity and bought our first lot. We'd saved up enough money and bought a lot and went and got a loan and built our first spec house. And now our company builds close to 150 houses a year, and has been for the last, we just celebrated 26 years in business.
You revealed how you conquered an alcohol and a drug addiction. How did you overcome a drag racing addiction?
I couldn't. I wouldn't go. I didn't go for 5 years. And what was really, really funny is Gary Beck hadn't been for like several years. And I said, okay, I'm going to go first class and go to the Top Fuel Club thing they have, or whatever, Top Eliminator Club. And I sit down, and 2 people over is sitting Gary Beck, and he hadn't been for a couple years. And it's tough. It's tough to go. And then I got treated with respect from Tony and Don Schumacher immensely. A lot of people sort of still harbored the things, or the ways that I reacted, the way I conducted myself, my alcohol and whatever else. But they overlooked that.
Racing, like most sports, requires a certain level of courage, of perseverance, and of fearlessness. Those are things we tend to forget as we get older. But when we get to see it through the eyes of a child experiencing things for the first time, we remember that we are capable of doing anything we put our minds to. But when those eyes belong to 7-year-old Guy Breezy, we can learn a lot more than just that. In 2012, Guy was diagnosed with leukemia. For the last 4 years, he has undergone treatment and has been fighting for his life. But this weekend, with the help of Terry Chandler's Make-A-Wish trackside program, 1981 Top Fuel champion Jeb Allen, and the whole NHRA community, Guy gets to realize a dream.
Well, we built a house, my construction company did, called the House of Hope. And we raised $200,000 and helped 20 kids in our local community. And then we gave $10,000 to the Make-A-Wish Foundation to have Terry Chandler pick people to do 10 races. And that was my means of saying to the racing world, I make amends to anybody that I ever harmed. Once you're a champion, you're a champion. Nobody can ever take that away from you. And the feeling of being a champion, and I don't wear my rings, I sort of hide my trophies around, you know, I don't make a big deal about it. To be able to have been 8 years old, going to the drag races, and knowing that I was the last guy leaving the pit area, and in front of all these people, I won all these races. That feeling of being that champion still exists today. I'd like to be remembered as being the one that opened the door for all the younger people to start driving dragsters. As the youngest world champion, and I don't think, I mean, it could happen, but I doubt it because the cars go so quick now. I stepped right into a Top Fuel dragster and surprised the heck out of them. And I'd like to be remembered for having Larry Sutton said, just grab a hold of whatever you can grab a hold of and hang on, you know, and to be able to drive a car without driving a lower class car or anything. That was one of my biggest accomplishments.